We begin the second parak of Moed Katan here on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Misha Hafach Zesav. So after they start the process of pressing olives, there are two stages in the process, and we try to get the oil out of the olives. We put it in a vat, and it begins slowly to soften. But then you have to turn them upside down. Once you turn them upside down, then they begin to spoil. And therefore, you have to immediately press them in the olive press, in the gat. So that's what the Mishnah says, that we're going to allow you to press the olives immediately after you turned over the olives, because that's when they begin to spoil. The Ero Eva. Now the Mishnah turns to a different topic, and that is Avelus, Rahman al-Islam. During the period of grief and mourning, there's an Isur Malacha, and it would seem that the same heter of Hafach Zesav, that you're allowed to press the olives, applies even to an oven. Or ones, what happens if a person was prevented from doing the pressing because of an ones? Something happened, and even though right before the Yontif, he had turned over the olives, we're going to allow him to press the olives because he was an onus. It was circumstances beyond his control. He wasn't able to fit in the pressing of the olives before Yontif. Oh, Poland, he had hired workers, and they tricked him. And they didn't do what they had to do. They were meant to press the olives before Yontif, and then he failed to do so. The Mishnah says, Toen Korah Rishona. Now, we have a beam, right, that they use to press the olives, and you can only press the olives in all the above cases that we had at the beginning of the Mishnah one time, the first time. That's called Korah Rishon. He needs another Korah. That he can do after Yontif. It's not absolutely critical, says Rabbi Yehuda, that we allow you to finish the process of pressing the olives on Chol Moed. You can begin to implement that process by Korah Rishona, because that's going to really prevent spoilage. But once you prevent spoilage, that's all we're going to allow you to do. We're not going to allow you to do Korah Shniel. However, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Solev v'gomer v'gof hidarka. He's going to allow you not only to press the olives and remove the oil, but also to, once you've received the oil in a vat, he's going to allow you to seal the vat, and you can do it in the normal way. In other words, according to Rabbi Yossi, as we discussed earlier on Amud Aleph, you're allowed to do these malachos because they come under this category of Dover Avud, and he doesn't have to worry about, do it as a Maisa Hejot and not a Maisa Uman. He can do it in the usual manner, complete the process of pressing, and even seal the vat. Now the Gemara has the following question: Pasach bi'ovel v'siyem b'moed. The Mishnah opens up by telling you that you're allowed to press the olives on Chol Moed, and then he goes on and says v'Iru Eva. But he doesn't say that during Avelus. It doesn't say anywhere in the Mishnah explicitly that you're allowed to press the olives during Avelus, and Avelus asur b'malacha. And the Gemara offers two answers. Number one, Amar Rav Shisha B'rei Rav Idi. The reason why the Mishnah didn't spell out that you're allowed to press the olives during Avelus is because the Mishnah wanted to imply that during Avelus, which is more chomer than Chol Moed, you are not allowed to press the olives. In the case of Chol Moed, if he wasn't able to press his olives before Yontif, will allow him to press the olives once they're turned over during Chol Moed, but not during Avelus. And the Gemara is going to explain why we're more machmir in Avelus than we are in Chol Moed. Because right now the Gemara is very perplexed about it. What do you mean? You're going to be more machmir in Avelus? Avelus is the Rabbanan. Certainly you want to be more machmir in Chol Moed, which is the Oraisa. That's exactly what Rav Ashi is going to tell us now. Rav Ashi, the Mishnah didn't even bother spelling out that this heter that applies on Chol Moed to press the olives applies during Avelus, lo mi boy b'mei evlin. It goes without saying, the Mishnah didn't even have to address this, that it's mutter during Avelus to be the Rabbananu. The entire enterprise of Iser Malach on Avelus is the Rabbanan b'shari, the Rabbanan allow it. Because you're going to take a loss once you've already turned over the olives, and they're going to spoil if you don't allow them to press the olives. And the Mishnah tells me, no, el afilu b'moed, even though Chol Moed is an Isa d'oraisa, the Isa Malach d'oraisa, b'makom say the Shari Rabbanon, in order to avoid financial loss, the Rabbanon permitted it. Very strange. The Gemara opens up by saying in the ratio of the statement that the Malach and Chol Moed is an Isa d'oraisa, and then it says, but Shari Rabbanon. What do you mean Shari Rabbanon? How could the Rabbanon be matir something that's d'oraisa? So the Ran is famous for saying that although the Torah prohibits Malach Chol Moed, none of the specifics are spelled out by the Torah. When and how and what. This was given by the Torah over to the authority of the Rabbanon in order to define when it's Asur b'Malacha and when it's Mutter b'Malacha. But once they define it as Asur, it's Asur b'Deraisa. Now, where does the Torah prohibit Malacha, that we say it's Doraisa? And the answer is in the parsha of Pesach, it says, Eschag HaMatzos Tishmar Shivas Yomim. And the Gemara Chagiga has a drasha that Shivas Yomim means all the days of Pesach, including Chol Moed, you have to observe the Isur Malacha and refrain from performing Malacha. That's for all 7 days. The Gemara Chagiga offers another possibility that Torah defines Chol Moed as Mikra Kodesh, that we have to designate it as a day that has Kedush Sayom with an Isur Malacha. And therefore, says Rav Ashi, that we should read our Mishnah as a Lomi Bud. If we're going to allow you to do a Malach on Chol Moed for the sake of Davar Almud, because you've already turned over the olives, how much more so in Avelus, which is only the Rabbanan? Tanya Kavose, the Rabbi Shisha, Braid, Rav Idi. Then on Avel, we're going to be machmir. Elu dvarim ha'osim li Avel b'mei evlo. What are we allowed in the case of Avelus? Zeisav hafuchim tanim. That means if you have olives and you turned it over and therefore they're about to spoil, you're allowed to load them onto the beam or have the beam go into them. And this is called Te'ina Rishona, in order to begin the process of pressing them, the Chado Leguf. And there's something called Hagofas Hakli. Hagofa means to seal it down. They used to put plaster around the top of the lid of a kad, a barrel. And you're allowed to do this during Avelus. Upishtono lahalos mina mishra. Mishra is where they used to soak the garments as the first station in the process of laundering the garments. And he has a kli pishton, and he's allowed lahalos mina mishra. Mishra again is that pool. It's samro lahalos minayora. And they used to dye the wool by soaking it in a vat with dye in it. And all this can be done during Avelus. But it sounds like the Avel himself is not necessarily involved actively, but we do it on his behalf. Now, when you put wool in a dyer's vat, you have to be very careful to remove the wool before it becomes ruined. That's got to be done very, very careful. Umarbitim sadeu mishetagia onas hamayim shalom. And what does this mean? You're allowed, he says that you're allowed to water your field because, again, this is a davar avud. So basically, this brisa says that others are permitted to do this on behalf of the mourner because of a davar avud, but he himself, the avel, is not allowed to do it. And that is a proof for Rav Shisha against Rav Ashi. Because Rav Ashi says that even the avel is allowed to do malacha, the davar avud. Getting back to the brisa of Yehuda Omer, Af zorin lo, stay near. Stay near is a field where they turned over the ground to allow the rainwaters to seep deep below the ground. And now it's time to put the seeds in the ground later on in the season, and we're allowed to put the seeds into the field, into the ground, on behalf of the oven. V'sado medes lepishna. And there's a special heter in the case of a field that's growing flax. If you don't immediately seed the field, then you won't be able to use it for the entire season. Right? Flax has to be planted in the proper time. It's time sensitive, it's urgent. And we're going to allow others to plant for him on his behalf a sadeh homedes lepishtan, so that he shouldn't suffer the loss of losing an entire season. And this is Rabbi Yehuda's kula. Amru the Chachamim said to Rabbi Yehuda, no, this is not a substantial loss. We're not going to allow performing malacha on behalf of an avel during his afelus just because of this very limited loss. Im lo tizra bibachir tizra bi'afen. There are different times in the season. There's an earlier part of the season and there's the later part of the season. And therefore, even if you don't plant or plow his field in order to put these seeds inside in the early part of the season, not catastrophic. We can wait till the later part of the season. And if he can't, he can't sow flax because it's going to get ruined, then let him find a different kind of a seed. There are ways of doing damage control and limiting the loss, making it a minimal loss. Yehuda holds it doesn't matter. Even if this is a minimal loss, then we're allowed to have someone do labor on behalf of an other. And all this is meant to prove Rav Shisha Bereid Rav Idi, who says that we have to be more machmir and dvarim hamutarim bi'avel asurim bi'avel hamutarim b'moed asurim bi'avel. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer Zeisav hafuchim v'ein sham uman elahu. We're going to add another condition before we allow others to do labor on behalf of the other. It's not enough that he turned over the Zaysim, but we also have to assume that these are the only umnin who are available now to do the work, and if you don't allow them to do the work, it's going to spoil. Or kado leguf, we talked about putting the magupas hachavis to seal off the barrel. The ain sham uman elahu. There's only one uman available. Pishtanu la'alos min mishra. We have to take the flax and remove it from the pool, and take out the wool from the dyer's vat because otherwise it'll spoil. There's only one uman available. He's allowed to do this bitzina in a private way. One second. So now I want to quote to you a very interesting Rashi. When it says here Elahu, and it repeats itself over and over again, the word who is not referring to someone other than the mourner, but rather the Ovel himself. We're going to allow the Ovel to do certain malachas b'tzina privately. If there's no one else who could do that malacha, he's the only one available. And if he doesn't do that malacha himself, then he's going to suffer a financial loss. So that here we have a kula from Shimon Gamliel that even the Ovel himself can get involved in the labor. Yes, sir, again, and furthermore, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, im haya uman l'rabim, if he serves, this Ovel serves on behalf of the rabbin, the public, he's a barber, or he's the attendant in the bathhouse. In those days, bathhouse was a big deal. So he's serving the rabbin, he's serving the public. So now we're talking about Rav Shimon Gamliel as a kula in regel. Just 1 second. Is it regel or avelus here? That's what we have to figure out. Just 1 second. Do you have it there in any of your Gemaras, whether we're talking about Hareza Yasa? It says Esa Regel. That's why I thought it was the Regel. What? He says here, in this case, you have this, David, in your Gemara, number 22. He says in note number 22, he says, in this case, the prohibition against a mourner working is waived because of the public's urgent need for his services.
Shouldn't lose your income.
Whoa. How do you see that in the Gemara? That's what I don't know. Okay. It's a pellet to me because the language here, the Brisa, is Igia Eis HaRegel. If we're talking about Avelus, I don't know why the word regel here is being used. I know we're pressed for time here, but.
Festival season arrives. There's no work except for this fellow to do the work.
Oh, so it says festival, correct?
Yeah.
So why is he saying here it's a din in Avelus? That's just 1 second. He says, oh, I see. That's what I couldn't figure out. And here's where the Masechet comes through. Higia Eis HaRegel means shekol hatzibur bohem l'staper v'lirchotz b'merchatz l'kvod haregel. Why is it a public urgent need? Because everybody for the regel is coming to get haircuts and going into the bathhouse. And there's no one around except for the Ovel to do the malach on their behalf. And then we're going to make you. Okay, then. So we're up to the Arisin. Okay, so we'll have to take a break now, and we'll pick up the Arisim a little bit later on. Does anybody have a pencil by any chance? No, because I'll tell you the truth, if I don't write it down, I'm not going to remember it.